Welcome to Bloor Street and St. Matthew's United Churches on this second Sunday in June, this Sunday in Pride Month, this showery day in summer. Looking ahead, I'll mention that next Sunday we will be marking the 30th anniversary of National Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada, and then the following Sunday will be Pride Sunday at our shared service on the 28th of June. I hope it's not a stretch, but I must say this week I sometimes find as I watch things bursting into life, growing and getting almost exuberant and thrusting their leaves and blossoms into the sky, into the light, that I try to understand what our worship services do for us. And I was thinking that they're kind of like photosynthesis, a spiritual kind of photosynthesis where the sunlight transforms seeds and roots into plants and trees full of life. And it's like God's Spirit in the world invisibly penetrates and becomes part of us and nudges us into life and into blooming and fullness in all our humanity, transforms us. It worked for me walking down the street and looking at people's front gardens this week. I sensed that that's why we come here together as community in the life of the Spirit. So however you have come to this time, whether you are on Zoom this morning or here in the gathering space, this ever-changing week-by-week gathering space at St. Matthew's, we lost some more pews to one side for those on Zoom. So there are now pews up the middle, and that's it. However you come to this time, it's good to have you here. This place is safe. This place is safe for questions. This place is safe for doubt, for vulnerability, and safe for healing. It's safe for love. And what happens here as we gather, and as we explore stories, and as we are met by God's Spirit in this place, well, it will be different because you're here, because you are a part of it. And as we gather on land that has sacred memory, and we recognize that we gather on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, that is now home to diverse Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This land has been cared for by the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Wendat, the Petun First Nations, and the Seneca over thousands of years. So let us be mindful of our broken covenants and the need to make right with all our relations. At this time, we also light a candle, not in order to somehow invite God into our place of worship, for God is always with us, inviting us to join with God in community, but to recognize and remind us of the unflinching presence and to reform the promise of new beginnings in the light of Christ, and that we go together. Let us pray. In the mystery of the beginning of things, Creator God, you made this planet, rock upon layer of rock, to be weathered and planted, to become a place for living. In the mystery of human life, Parent God, you made us, flesh and blood and spirit and bone, image of yourself in all our humanity and all our diversity. You made us for loving. in the mystery of your unconditional love, healing God. You came in Jesus, the flesh of our flesh, the bone of our bone, to bring us back to our true belonging together. Forgiving God, we admit that we don't really like prayers of confession. To speak aloud about our imperfection, our failings, our actions that cause harm and the good we refuse to do makes us vulnerable. We feel bad about ourselves. And yet in love, you invite us into honesty and self-awareness. We know that holding things back allows them to continue wounding us, swirling within us. Guide us to speak aloud the things we must confess to find wholeness. And forgive us, even though those words are sometimes so hard to say. We long for your goodness to shape our lives, the life of this community and this hurting world. Infuse us with courage and with hope and with love for the world. May we listen deeply, see far and wide, and live faithfully, knowing that your new world has begun already. May it be so. Amen.
Good morning, everyone. Some notes on today's reading. Matthew chapters 9 and 10 present a pivotal moment in Jesus' ministry, the moment when his work has expanded to a point where he seeks help to meet the demands. As he moves through towns and villages, teaching and healing, he is moved with compassion for the crowds. The need is huge. This moment leads to the commissioning of a core group of followers, sending them out to extend his mission. The verses we are reading today capture the essence of being disciples, responding to the needs of people, relying on God to provide what is needed to meet those needs, and carrying out the work of healing and restoration. To do this, Jesus' followers need to model themselves on Jesus, which means that faith cannot end with passive belief, but carries through with active participation in the work of restoration. Chapter 9, verses 35 to chapter 10, verse 16. Selected verses. Jesus traveled among all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, announcing the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were troubled and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The size of the harvest is bigger than you can imagine, but there are few workers. Therefore, plead with the Lord of the harvest to send out workers for his harvest." He called his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to throw them out and to heal every disease and every sickness. Jesus sent these 12 out. "As you go, make this announcement: the kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those with skin diseases, and throw out demons. You received without having to pay, therefore give without demanding payment. Workers deserve to be fed, so don't gather gold or silver or copper coins for your money belts to take on your trips. Don't take a backpack for the road, or 2 shirts or sandals or a walking stick. Whatever city or village you go into, find somebody in it who is worthy and stay there until you go on your way. When you go into a house, say, peace. If the house is worthy, give it your blessing of peace. If the house isn't worthy, take back your blessing. If anyone refuses to welcome you or listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet as you leave that house or city. Look, I'm sending you as sheep among wolves. Therefore be wise as snakes and innocent as doves. In these readings, we hear God's voice. God is still speaking. Thanks be to God.
We might as well get right to it. Jesus says two things while he's observing the growing crowds of people who are milling around him, each with tremendous needs. The size of the harvest, Jesus says, looking out at the throng around him, is bigger than you can imagine. And he goes on, but there are few workers. Okay, so today we get the few laborers, the shortage of volunteers part. Shortage of people stepping up to help. But what's this about an abundant harvest that's ripe and just waiting to be gathered in, to be made into food that we can enjoy together, that will nourish each and all of us? Where around us is there such abundance, such readiness for Jesus' workers to gather in? Jesus is looking out at an abundance of people with huge needs who are lost, who are struggling. They're seeking out Jesus because they hope maybe that he can help. No more than that. This is no revival movement. The Roman occupation and its oppressive measures are ever present, and they have no control over that. The preoccupations of the religious leaders on things that seem very distant from people's daily lives is also wearily familiar and predictable. And now this Jesus. It's not just what he does to heal and free people from burdens in life. It's what he says about God. God as not hidden somewhere in the mishmash of rituals and rules, but here with them, with us, as love. God cares. And Jesus sees us. He really sees us. We can tell that we matter to him. Our experiences matter. Our pain and our frustration, our going here and there, trying this and that with no one to lead us, to understand, no one to trust. He sees it. Now, where most of us would be simply overwhelmed by the clamoring voices and huge needs, Jesus sees the opportunity for God to bring healing and acceptance and hope to people who hunger for it. The religious leaders have failed to guide people to a vital encounter with a loving God who yearns for life-giving relationship. They don't even know, the people in the crowd, that this is what they are hungry for. They don't have words for it: love, forgiveness, purpose, community. But it's a huge opportunity, a virtual harvest for vital human community. It doesn't help that for us, looking around us, that we struggle to see those ripe fields awaiting harvest. Few people in our society seem to be looking for what Christian faith communities like ours have to provide. At the same time, we can definitely agree, as I said, that the laborers, the volunteers, are increasingly few. So where Jesus sees urgency and possibility, churches are seeing an all too familiar reality. If the time is ripe, no one seems to have informed the members of our society of that. So churches have a hard time believing in the pronouncement of a plentiful harvest, let alone having work crews mobilized to make it happen. People's energy and time is no longer what it once was. We've been pleading for the Lord of the harvest to send out workers for years, in fact. Jesus is doing his thing, in the thick of it all, just doing his thing. He proclaims good news, really good news of love that is God's truest self. And he heals every disease and affliction. He shows compassion. This was his thing. He allowed himself to feel with them, with the crowds that gathered around, desperate. The Greek word for compassion conveys the feeling of a twisting pain in the gut, an intense stabbing pain. It translates the Hebrew word riham, which describes the painful contractions of childbirth. A woman in labor. That's how Jesus felt when he saw the crowds, these total strangers. He knew them that intimately. He's preaching to huge crowds. And the throngs are growing every day. And alongside him, he has this group of friends and followers to assist him. They help with the logistics of where to stay, what to eat, how to pay for the daily needs of the growing ministry. And they've mostly been with Jesus for quite a while now, walking alongside, observing him teach and heal, standing in the midst of those chaotic crowds with him up close. But now something shifts. Jesus borrows the phrase, like sheep without a shepherd, from Ezekiel the prophet, who confronted the religious leaders for exploiting and abusing people. But Jesus adds to that the sharply emotional language of troubled and torn apart, to emphasize the desperation that people around him are feeling. He understands that they are harassed and helpless. The Greek for helpless means literally thrown to the ground. It's a pivotal moment. The moment when Jesus' work provokes a need for his followers to join in with him in the ministry. And it leads them, Jesus' closest followers, to a deeper practice of discipleship. He turns to them to join with him. And Jesus' words of commissioning capture the heart of discipleship, bearing witness to God's astonishing presence, offering newness and freedom in the world, responding to people's real needs, relying on God to provide us with what meets those needs, and carrying out the actual work of healing and restoration. Faith doesn't end with timid affirmations of belief, but carries through with active involvement in the work of reconciliation and renewal. The people had been let down by lack of leadership, Not leadership that debates the fine points of the law, not leadership in ensuring that worship in the temple is done rightly, they're okay there. Not worship that made compromises and kept the Romans happy, that's going well. The leadership that's missing comes from the experience of going into communities with compassion and a curiosity driven by God's love. God not out there somewhere in the heavenly distances, but here around us, involving us, engaging with us, equipping and commissioning us. The church is about building community with the relationships with the community so that others can see and experience God's love through us. Up close. Simply going door to door or just expecting people to show up on a Sunday morning, although thank you very much for doing that, is not enough. We've lost our capacity somehow to believe in and to experience the transcendent. We've left God to be arm's length. We've lost a direct experience with what God's dream is all about and how to engage with people in that dream, God's dream of the world and a full life. We too are a lost people living in a lost society. We've lost our capacity, as I said, to believe in and experience the transcendent in our scientific sophistication. We've lost our capacity to be expectantly aware of the sacred. We've lost our capacity, our willingness to be vulnerable with one another and to risk entwining our lives with others. We're lost to our earth, severing the roots that nourish us, treating our planet as as an endless supplier to feed our insatiable hungers. And we're lost to ourselves, having created a society where fitting in, seeking to conform to expectations is the way to thrive and succeed. Make no mistake, God is where the lost things are. God is where the search is at its fiercest. If I want to find God, I have to seek the lost. I have to get lost. I have to leave the safety and comfort of the familiar, the known, and venture out. I have to recognize my own lostness and consent to be found. This hope that we can be found is at the heart of the words the disciples are to speak about God's dream, God's coming near. As the author Henry Nouwen wrote, compassion asks us to go where it hurts, to enter into the places of pain, to share in the brokenness, fear, confusion, and anguish. Compassion challenges us to cry out with those in misery, to mourn with those who are lonely, to weep with those in tears. Compassion requires us to be weak with the weak, vulnerable with the vulnerable, and powerless with the powerless. And so the core of Jesus' followers are sent out without anything. When Jesus sees in the clamoring crowds an abundance, he's urging us, instead of turning away from pain, our pain or the pain of another, to let it be our teacher. What if we let it ground us right here right now in this time? What if we let compassion, raw and vulnerable, open us to those in front of us that we might really see them? To see and hear them in ways that they can sense that they're touched by. What if we listened? God's way is not an escape from the brokenness and pain of life. It's a deeper engagement with and response to the brokenness and pain. And right there, in that place, in that moment, it brings life and it brings abundance. This is the new leadership for a renewed community that Jesus pulls his followers into experiencing. These are the new wineskins for the Spirit's new wine. Leadership that is open-hearted and brave, even vulnerable. Jesus embodies a leadership that is deeply relational and motivated by compassion. And now, along with compassion, Jesus introduces a note of urgency. The time is ripe. Bloor Street has now commissioned a search team, not to simply go out and hire a minister to do a job, but to take the story of a historic community's living faith, resourcefulness, people's sense of mission, values, and resilience, and to discern a path forward that is equipped by God's Spirit to navigate a way in a turbulent and hurting world. For that person, for that ministry to make a difference, it will need to be about everyone. It will need to be about us all, here and on Zoom. And St. Matthew's folks, I trust you can fill in the blanks accordingly, because we're not that different. So part, we discover, of Jesus' own mission is not to be a solo Messiah, but to train followers to join the purposes for which God sent him, equipping them to be a part of an ongoing movement of God's dream into the world. And a part of their formation is in turn learning how to make disciples themselves. And on it goes. The author Barbara Brown Taylor, in her book, The Preaching Life, stresses the need for all of the followers of Jesus, all Christians, to recognize that we have been called to be ministers. She writes, somewhere along the way, we've misplaced the ancient vision of the church as a priestly people. We set apart for ministry and baptism, confirmed and strengthened in worship, made manifest in service to the world. That vision is a foreign one to many church members who have learned from colloquial usage that minister means ordained person in a congregation, while lay person means someone who does not engage in full-time ministry. Professionally speaking, fair enough. But ecclesiologically, it's a disaster. Language like that turns clergy into the purveyors of religion and lay people into consumers who shop around for a church that offers the best product. Jesus chooses us. He confers authority, authenticity, we might call it today. Authenticity to speak to others of profound hopes and deep regrets, of reconciliation and healing, to have courage to stand with others who are likewise helpless, hapless, and harassed, to speak and act with compassion. It would appear that the only qualification one needs to be a follower of Jesus is that willingness to do so, a willingness to let Jesus' Spirit and way transform them, us, and equip them, us. At the end of this service, while the last note of the last hymn is still reverberating in the air, a voice, today it will be mine, says something like, "Go in peace to love and serve, go into the world in the power of the Spirit," or words to that effect. These are not words for consumers of God's love, God's healing presence in the world. These are words for the providers of God's love. These are words for us. May it be so. Amen. The world is now too dangerous and too beautiful for anything but love. May your eyes be so blessed you see God in everyone, your ears so you hear the cry of the poor. May your hands be so blessed that everything you touch is a sacrament, your lips so you speak nothing but the truth in love. May your feet be so blessed that you run to those who need you. And may your heart be so opened, so set on fire, that your love changes everything. Go in peace.